HighBridge, a division of Recorded Books, presents The Marvel of Martyrdom, The Power of Self-Sacrifice in a Selfish World, by Sophia Moskalenko and Clark Mccauley. Read by Exie Sands. Chapter 1. An Invitation. We live in a selfish culture. Individualism, personal achievement, self-interest, and rational choice are the guiding principles for us Westerners. And yet, in the foundation of our culture, in its ancient traditions, stories, and history, lies a powerful idea that reaches beyond the satisfaction of selfish pursuits. Martyrdom and self-sacrifice are cornerstones of Western civilization. We may feel detached from the Judeo-Christian theology or from children's folklore, but as products of this culture, we carry within us a seed of this idea. The Marvel of Martyrdom will reveal the power of martyrdom to change the world, today as well as millennia ago. In Western countries, there are two systems for understanding the world: religion and science. These two systems come together in surprising ways in exploring the power of self-sacrifice and martyrdom. Relying on ancient wisdom and modern science, the Marvel of Martyrdom will demonstrate the power of self-sacrifice to transform individual lives, making them happier and more meaningful. The Marvel of Martyrdom is about martyrdom and self-sacrifice, but more than that, it is about meaning in life and triumph of the divine over the mundane. What do we live for? Once upon a time, humans lived in small kinship-based communities, where every individual was intimately tied to the community's well-being and its very existence. Life was hard, and so full of risk and danger that there could be no routine. This day there was food, but the next day everyone went without. This day you were safe, but the next day you had to fend off predators or enemies to stay alive. When you are forced to fight for life, you don't question its meaning. Things have changed. Along came agriculture and industry, sturdy buildings, police and armies, roads and cars. In the Western world, we are removed from the origins of our food, from the forces of nature, from the birth of our children, and from the death of our elders. What's left is the mundane. For most of us, everyday life is a set of motions, some pleasant, some not, but altogether keeping us running like hamsters in a wheel. We get up in the morning, rush to get ready, sit in traffic, on our way to school and work. We put out fires, addressing the most pressing issues in our home or cubicle. At lunch, we catch up on gossip and news. In the evening, we corral our family or friends to sit around the table and feel the warmth of their community. We watch some TV or read before bed, and we retire at night to start again in the morning. The weekends differ slightly in pace and setting, but continue a busy round of activities. Every once in a while, we pause and ask ourselves, what's the point of all this hustle and bustle? Unlike animals, we humans have the ability to see the big picture, with ourselves fading in comparisons with the billions of people living now, the billions who lived before us, and the billions who will come after us. The world may appear as a big anthill, with tiny specks rushing around, all alike and interchangeable. What is the point? We ask ourselves. What do we live for? There are material goals that many can agree on: a house, a salary, a Rolex, a BMW, but most people would not say that these are what they live for. Ask yourself, what gets you out of bed in the morning? Is it your children? Your intellectual curiosity? Perhaps what moves you is your love for your country, or your belief in justice and equality. These are important motivations, but they are not universally understood. Your religion may mean nothing to me. Your children are not my concern. And your patriotism looks like fanaticism to me. There is no monetary equivalent of ethnic pride, no price to put on religion. When you say your country is important to you, what do you mean? When you say your children are the meaning of your life, what does that translate to? The only way to know the worth of these intangible social values is to determine how much someone is willing to sacrifice for them. We realize how much our children mean to us when we spend sleepless nights by their beds, and when we experience an unquestionable feeling that we would give everything, including our lives, to protect them. We know that justice is important to us when we get involved to protect the innocent at a personal cost, be it in a bar fight or at a staff meeting. We understand that religious belief drives us when we sacrifice Sunday sleep to go to church, or when we behave according to religious doctrine at the expense to our selfish pleasure. Our priorities and values are evident only from our sacrifices. In other words, what we live for is what we would be willing to sacrifice for. According to legend, the wisest man who ever lived, King Solomon, had to settle a dispute between two women. Both had given birth to a baby boy on the same day in the same house, but overnight one baby died. In the morning, both mothers claimed the living child as their own, and they came to King Solomon for his wise judgment. The king said, "Bring me a sword." When the sword was brought, he ordered that the baby be cut in half, each woman to get a half of the baby she claimed as hers. One of the women exclaimed, "Give her the baby, only don't kill him." The others said, "Let nobody have him, cut him in half." Indeed, a wise man was King Solomon, for in that moment he knew what was most important to each woman. For the first, who was willing to suffer the loss of her child in order to keep him safe, the most important thing was the child and her love for him. For the second, who was willing to let the guards kill the baby, the most important was to win against the other woman. King Solomon knew the true love of a mother in the first woman, because he witnessed her readiness to sacrifice for it, and to her he gave her unharmed son. Parental love is easy to understand. After all, animals are also capable of great sacrifices for their young, charging against predators bigger and stronger than they, risking their lives to protect their offspring. One may say we are biologically programmed, compelled by our genes, to behave this way. A heroic act of self-sacrifice is not extraordinary when it is meant to save one's kin. In recognition of this fact, the Carnegie Hero Fund Medal is only given to those who risked their lives for unrelated others. So, although living and sacrificing for one's children is a fact of life, it hardly elevates one above the anthill. Animals' hustle and bustle is, after all, also for the benefit of their offspring. Humans yearn for something greater. Thus we have group identities, country, ethnicity, religion, unparalleled in the animal world, because our groups include millions of unrelated people who will never know each other face to face. Each group identity has a history, and its rituals, and each calls on its followers to forsake alternative value systems in its favor. If you are an American patriot, you can't be a French patriot. If you are proud of your Yiddish cup, you can't at the same time be a WASP. If you are a proud Christian, you can't be a proud Muslim. The social world is rife with competition and conflict. A social value system is a fragile construction. It exists so long as enough people agree that these values are better than others. Paganism was largely replaced by monotheism. Apparently, enough pagans were convinced that their religious values were inferior to the alternatives presented to them. The Soviet Union fell because enough Soviets preferred the history and norms of their ethnic groups to the Soviet man advanced by the government in Moscow. Individuals like Osama bin Laden and groups like the Islamic State wished that Western civilization, with its history and values, would likewise yield to the global caliphate. If enough Westerners convert to Islam, for example, then Western civilization will indeed fail. Country, ethnicity, and religion, even political party affiliation, are therefore in need of assertion and reassertion if they are to survive. In cultural conflict, each side tries to gain a critical mass against its rivals. And how does one social construction assert its superiority over another? In our quest for meaning in life, how can we determine to which group to pledge allegiance, which history to believe, and which doctrine to follow? Like King Solomon, we are likely to determine the worth of a cause by how much people sacrifice for it. We are inspired by martyrdom because giving one's life for a cause, or being ready to do so, is the ultimate sacrifice. Martyrdom bears witness to the cause for which the sacrifice was made, brands the cause as valid and important, and lifts the martyr and those who are also ready to sacrifice for their cause above the mundane, above the routine, above the anthill, towards something greater. This is what our book is about. The power of self-sacrifice and ultimately martyrdom to move and inspire those who see it. Janusz Korczak. Chances are the name of Janusz Korczak is not familiar to you. If you Google the name, you may come across a photograph of Korczak that was taken shortly before his death. In the photograph, Korczak, sitting in what looks like a train station, holds in his arms a girl 5 or 6 years old. This photograph will haunt you. The little girl's eyes glisten with piercing fear. She may have been crying. Her grip on Korczak's neck is at once weak and desperate. Korczak's face, an aged face of a thinker, bearded and balding, with glasses sliding down his nose, has a look of hopeless resolve. The old man and the child hold on to each other with the little strength they have left, in the face of the inevitable horror waiting for them. Janusz Korczak was a pediatrician, a writer, and a teacher. Born Henryk Goldschmidt, he was a Polish Jew from Warsaw. He never married or had children. His father was mentally ill, and Korczak worried about developing his father's symptoms and inflicting suffering on loved ones. Instead, he dedicated his life to helping strangers, through his medical profession, through his writing, but most of all through his pedagogical work. Starting from 1911, Korczak ran a Jewish orphanage of about 200 children. By all accounts, it was an extraordinary place, where a child's personality, her natural sense of justice, her creativity and aspirations were cherished and cultivated. With the beginning of World War II, the reality outside the orphanage drifted further and further from the ideals developed within. Korczak directed all his efforts toward maintaining as close to a normal life for his children as possible. When the orphanage was moved to the Warsaw Ghetto, these efforts began every morning when Korczak went door to door asking for donations of food for the children. Helping to keep the children and himself going despite worsening conditions was a magical world they created together in writings, drawings, and theatrical performances. On several occasions, Korczak's former students or just well-wishers offered him a chance to escape the horrors of the ghetto. One of these offers came from fellow educator Igor Neverly. Neverly, a member of the Polish resistance, helped several Jews escape capture by the Nazis, hiding them and transporting them to safety. Realizing the orphanage was going to be sent to a concentration camp, Neverly obtained a fake identity card for Korczak and came to the ghetto disguised as a water and sewer inspector. He also had with him papers that allowed him to bring out a locksmith who was working there. I explained that this was the very last chance to save even a few from perishing, Neverly recalled. There could be no postponement. If the doctor would close the orphanage, some of the children and teachers would perhaps have a chance to escape to the other side. He had only to give the order and come away with me at once. He looked at me as though I had proposed a betrayal or an embezzlement. I wilted under his gaze, and he turned away. Korczak could not accept an offer of escape, because he could not abandon the children at this uncertain, scary, horrible time. He stayed with them, and eventually the orphanage was marched to the Warsaw train station to be loaded onto trains to Treblinka. On the platform, Korczak received his last offer of escape. A Nazi officer in charge asked bystanders, who was the old man with his head held high, marching toward the train alongside dozens of silent children. Hearing that this was Korczak, the officer thought for a while, remembering something. He then came to Korczak, who was already aboard the train, to ask whether he was the author of a children's book, Bankruptcy of Little Jack. "Yes, but does that in any way relate to the train leaving?" asked Korczak in return. "No, it's just that I read your book. It's a good book. You can stay, Doctor." "And the children?" "That's impossible. The children will go." "You are mistaken." The doctor raised his voice. "You are mistaken. The children are above all." And Korczak closed the door of the train car behind him. In Treblinka, pictures drawn by Korczak's children decorated the walls long after their authors had perished. Korczak marched into the gas chamber, as he did to the train in Warsaw, holding the hands of his children. What we mean by martyrdom. The word martyrdom has very strong connotations, emotional, political, and social. It is not surprising, therefore, that politicians, news media, and laypeople use the word for the impact it would have, even when a different word would be more accurate. Suicide bombers, child victims of crimes, firefighters, and police officers doing their jobs have all been called martyrs. We want to be careful in our definition of martyrdom from the start. Martyrs are people who have made a decision to accept suffering and possibly death for a larger cause. The decision has to be made explicitly rather than impulsively, so that the gravity of the consequences is fully understood by the martyr. Accepting suffering means the martyr cannot act aggressively or respond to aggression. A martyr does not necessarily have to die to qualify for the title, but he or she must be ready and willing to die. A martyr's cause can be other people's well-being or a more global set of beliefs, religious or political. Finally, a martyr can be acting alone, or a group of individuals can together engage in martyrdom. Having stated what we believe martyrdom is, we now move on to what we believe martyrdom is not. First, victims are not martyrs. Victims have no choice about their suffering or death, and they are not able to fight, whereas martyrs have made a choice and are not willing to fight. Children can be victims, but cannot be martyrs, because they cannot make a fully informed choice about foregoing a life barely begun. Children and victims also have no ability to escape the evil that causes their suffering, even if they are willing to do so. Second, although all martyrs are heroes, not all heroes are martyrs. Heroes are people who do extraordinary things for a larger cause. Martyrs' willingness to accept suffering and death for a cause is extraordinary, which makes them heroes. But heroes can act impulsively, and it does not lessen their status, whereas martyrdom can only be premeditated. Highlighting this point, a recent study reported results of interviews with 51 recipients of Carnegie Hero Medal, each of whom had risked his or her life to save others. The study found that heroes acted intuitively rather than deliberately. The researchers concluded that heroic action likely arises from automatic intuitive processes. In contrast, martyrdom is guided by deliberated decision-making. Although heroes can be prepared to die, they aim to survive, as opposed to martyrs who choose to suffer and possibly die. If a firefighter sees an exit from a burning building, he takes it and remains a hero. By contrast, a martyr is often made precisely when he refuses an offer of safe passage. Heroes aim to directly benefit others, whereas martyrs' sacrifices are for an idea and can actually bring harm to martyrs' supporters in the short term. Thus, Gandhi's followers were beaten and shot, as were Martin Luther King's supporters, because of these martyrs' actions. Finally, while martyrs are able but unwilling to fight, heroes are both able and willing to fight. Soldiers and police officers often become heroes in battles. Passive acceptance of suffering and death is not part of a hero's repertoire. Third, suicide bombers are not martyrs. The discrepancies between martyrs and suicide bombers, and between suicide bombers and heroes, are discussed in greater detail in the section called Wolves in Sheep's Clothes. From that definition, it is clear that suicide bombers differ from martyrs in their use of aggression, unacceptable for a martyr. In Janusz Korczak's story, there are heroes, victims, and martyrs. The little girl in Korczak's arms in the haunting photograph, the children who died in the ghetto and in the gas chambers of Treblinka, are victims. They did not choose to suffer and die. They had no power to fight, no ability to escape their suffering. Igor Neverly, who risked his life by obtaining fake documents, sneaking into the ghetto under a false name, and attempting to smuggle Korczak out, was a hero. As a member of the resistance, he was fighting against the Nazis. He did extraordinary things at a great personal risk to help other people. He was not a martyr. He did not choose to suffer and die, but to escape the ghetto and fight. Korczak, along with his fellow teachers who stayed with the children in the ghetto and went to Treblinka to die with them, were martyrs. A total of 10 teachers, including Korczak, stayed with the children until the end. They were not trying to fight. Korczak and at least one other teacher, Polish Stefa Wojcinska, refused offers of escape, though they understood full well that to stay was to die. They put the children above their own lives, above all, as Korczak said. These distinctions between martyrs and victims, between heroes and martyrs, are pronounced in Korczak's story. But it is important to keep these distinctions in mind even when they are less obvious, and especially when they are deliberately obscured. Each of these categories, victim, hero, and martyr, brings a particular kind of perspective to our view of the world, and guides us in a particular emotional direction. Saying that someone is a victim implies that someone else is a victimizer. Because a victim is innocent and defenseless, stories of victims indict a perpetrator. Victim stories are verdicts on the inhumanity, cruelty, and unfairness of whoever or whatever caused the victimization. In this sense, stories of victims are less about them than they are about the violators. As a result, victim stories make us feel for the pain of the victim, but more significantly, they make us feel rage against the perpetrator. They motivate us to right the wrongs and avenge the suffering. Victim stories ignite righteous anger. By contrast, stories of heroes are more about the hero and less about the occasions that warrant heroism. A hero's incredible feats of courage or strength or steadfastness, her almost superhuman ability to risk everything for someone else's good, put the hero in the spotlight. It does not matter what stands in the way of the hero's action, she will overcome it. Hero stories make us feel invincible, fearless, and certain that good will prevail. They motivate us to do good, even under difficult circumstances. Hero stories give us courage. Stories of martyrs make us focus on both those who caused the martyr's suffering and on the martyr's cause. They simultaneously brand the martyr's persecutors as evil and the martyr's cause as good. They make us feel outrage at the aggressors, sadness for the martyr, and hope for the cause the martyr represents. Martyr stories motivate us to self-sacrifice. In telling these stories, there is a lot of room for inadvertent or deliberate manipulation of facts and public perceptions. Presenting a victim as a hero minimizes the significance of whatever caused the suffering. In some cases, it may be helpful, for example, to lessen personal trauma in survivors of childhood abuse, or to give a much-needed sense of agency to people diagnosed with cancer. In other cases, however, this false representation can mislead the audience into taking its eyes off the perpetrator, thus minimizing potential fallout from the crime. On the other hand, presenting a martyr as a victim diminishes the significance of the cause for which the martyr suffered. In the section titled The Famous, the Fake, and the Failed, we examine how true martyrs can be held back from upsetting the status quo, and how martyrdoms can be faked to incite a political reaction. Another kind of obfuscation, calling suicide bombers and terrorists like Osama bin Laden martyrs, is discussed in the section titled Wolves in Sheep's Clothes. By using the word martyrdom, radical Islamists deploy the power of martyr stories to radicalize their supporters and to intimidate their targets. The power of a martyr story rests on two pillars. One is the martyr's innocence and defenselessness, his refusal to initiate or reciprocate violence, his victimization indicting persecutors' cruelty, amorality, and injustice, and calling for revenge. The second pillar of a martyr story's power is the martyr's heroism, his steadfast determination to stand up for his cause, however painful it may be, and however hopeless it may seem. Terrorists are anything but innocent. Their violence against civilians is in itself an act of victimization. Although they may claim that the corrupt and immoral power is the West, terrorists' actions speak louder than their words. They are not the victims. They are the victimizers. They lack the moral authority of martyrs, the first pillar of the martyr's story's power. What about the second pillar, heroism? Suicide bombers' self-sacrifice is a choice that most of us would not find easy. Some may even find their actions heroic in the sense that it takes courage to end one's life. Western civilization has long known this combination of courage and lack of morals. In literature and philosophy, a character who combines these traits has been known as an anti-hero. Suicide bombers are not martyrs because their actions and their stories fail to differentiate between right and wrong, between innocence and guilt, between peace and violence. Martyrdom as storytelling. We are the stories we tell about ourselves. From our past, we remember some things and forget other things. We value some experiences and discount others. We blame or praise ourselves for something we have done, regret things we did or failed to do. Our present is how we perceive it, not always related to how it looks from the outside. And our future is where we see our story unfolding. Take away this story, and you are left with some facts, some abilities, some proclivities, but no character, no values, and no goals. Our culture is a set of stories as well. Among these stories that make up our cultural past, present, and future, stories of martyrdom are important and often pivotal. They appear in religion and history, in art and popular culture. To understand their importance and their ability to affect individuals as well as whole societies, we will tell some of these stories. Some will be intimately familiar to you, such as the story of Jesus, but others, like the Heaven's 100, will be new. We will refer to works of fiction that illuminate martyrdom. Some of these are immensely popular, like the Harry Potter series. Others, like the Golden Prince, are not so well known. Martyrdom permeates our culture and is at once familiar and mysterious. We therefore ask your patience as we work to uncover treasures of martyrdom hidden in even the most familiar stories. If we guide you through a story of martyrdom, we promise a return on the investment of your time and attention in the form of the understanding that we will draw from the story. This book will reward your curiosity with unexpected emotional experiences and intellectual revelations. In the age of Twitter, Facebook, iPhone apps, and the 24-hour news cycle, we are asking a lot. Attention spans grow shorter, as do our tempers with people and things that make us stop and slow down. But even in today's fast-moving world, some things are worth slowing down for. Understanding martyrdom and self-sacrifice, how they shaped our culture and continue to influence politics, society, and individual psychology, is one of these things. Everyday self-sacrifice. True martyrdom is rare. A constellation of circumstances must come together in the same person at the same place in the same historical moment to make martyrdom possible and politically powerful. But the necessary condition of martyrdom, its active ingredient, self-sacrifice, is readily available in our daily lives. Parents sacrifice for their children, lovers sacrifice for their beloved, soldiers sacrifice for their country, politicians sacrifice for their constituents. Well, maybe that last one is not so common. Still, we have all sacrificed for others, and we have all benefited from others' sacrifices for us. We are able to appreciate the martyrdom of others because we carry a glimmer of it within us. True, most of our sacrifices will never come close to the greatness of Jesus's, Gandhi's, or Korchak's. Yet we are able to empathize with these martyrs' dilemmas, their choices, their struggle, and their suffering. This empathy, feeling how the other person is feeling, comes from personal experiences of self-sacrifice. This empathy is what allows us to be moved by the martyr's self-sacrifice, to feel, think, or even do something in support of the martyr's cause. Our capacity for self-sacrifice in the name of a greater good is the reason martyrs are sometimes able to change history and culture. If we had not felt some reflection of martyrs' struggle, we would not be moved by their stories. If we had not been moved by martyrs' stories, we would not have spread the word of them to others. If martyrs' stories had not spread, they could not have created social movements in the name of the martyr's cause. The social movements, in turn, could not have changed the status quo had not some larger group or public put their belief in the martyr. In other words, a martyr relies on our ability to recognize, appreciate, and be moved toward self-sacrifice. Through self-sacrifice, a martyr appeals to the martyr in each of us. This book aims to understand not just the extreme self-sacrifice of martyrdom, but also the everyday self-sacrifice that steers our perception of people around us and of the larger world we live in. What can martyrdom tell us about the world and about ourselves? Through stories of martyrdom, the Marvel of Martyrdom will explain contradictions, how stories of sadness and suffering can be appealing, how the weak can defeat the strong, how calls for nonviolence can result in war, how ages-old wisdoms can shape modern politics. The Marvel of Martyrdom will describe metamorphoses, how children transition from egoism to altruism, how passive bystanders change into active participants, how societies go from the status quo to a revolution. Finally, the Marvel of Martyrdom will reveal a great resource, a human capacity for self-sacrifice, the often untapped reservoir of happiness and resilience within us. The Marvel of Martyrdom will show how our lives and our legacy are shaped by stories we pay attention to, and by stories we tell. The Origin. The authors of this book are psychologists who study radicalization and terrorism. It may seem surprising that here we focus on martyrdom, defining it as distinct from terrorism and suicide bombing. Yet this shift in our focus from terrorism to martyrdom is not as counterintuitive as it may seem. Terrorism, especially suicide bombing, is a form of self-sacrifice that kills and destroys. In this book, we focus on self-sacrifice that creates and builds. It is a case of positive political psychology. One of the goals of this book is to brighten the gloomy picture of human motivation that currently dominates social science. In economics, decision science, sociology, criminology, political science, and psychology, varieties of rational choice theory are riding high. In this kind of theory, humans act to maximize their individual self-interest. The individual is presumed to consider available alternatives and then act to produce the best outcome for herself. Rational choice theory could, in principle, accommodate interest in the outcomes of others. In practice, however, the expected value models, statistical analyses used in social sciences, blow up if more than self-interest is included. Balancing self-interest against interest in the welfare of others seldom appears in such models, except where an individual has a genetic interest in others. Indeed, genetic interest has become a model of human motivation. The selfish gene has risen from popular book to slogan and justification for a supposed biological imperative for selfishness. We think this dark picture does not include much of what most people live for and give for. The Marvel of Martyrdom will show instead the attractions and power of self-sacrifice. The Roadmap. We wrote The Marvel of Martyrdom after researching martyrdom for our first book together, Friction, How Radicalization Happens to Them and Us. Trying to understand the role of martyrdom in political radicalization, we looked for ideas in
Sample complete. Ready to continue?